Hello and welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another historical humans heritage. And at today's episode, we are looking at the historic center of Santa Cruz de Mompox, which was one of the key locations for Spanish colonialization in South America.
Yep.
Oh,
This is a lovely little place from 1540 in Colombia, and it has a beautiful little historic center. It's a city that grew from the 16th to 19th century, where it actually grew along the river. They used the river as the main street and kind of had the city as a sort of dike along it.
the River Magdalena.
Yeah.
But yeah, very cool. And it was the starting point. It was what a lot of colonial nations, especially the Spanish, like to do is they like to find the river deltas, the mouths, and sail up the river a little bit. It's a
Yep.
lot safer. You could drink the water usually, and you didn't have to worry about storms as much.
Yep. And specifically, Santa Cruz de Mompox was the main uh, distribution center for goods that came in from the port of Cartagena to be pushed into the mainland, into deeper inland, and vice versa for all the things getting extracted from the inland territories getting pushed out back to Spain.
What's
So
very cool about this specific city, too, is a lot of the original Spanish architecture and buildings still maintain their original purpose and give us a great insight into what a Spanish colonial city would actually look like, which is fascinating.
yeah, yeah,
But
no, it is. Yeah, yeah, it is basically operating in the same intended capacity that it had when it was founded almost 500 years ago, which is impressive. A lot of places go through periods of neglect and growth, and a lot of rezoning occurs as economic and political centers shift, and that didn't happen with this city. What was put there stayed there and continued to be used as it was originally intended, and that's not something that happens very often. So this it's a modern city, but it's also a place out of time, and that's very beautiful. It's very fun to look at.
it's very interesting because there's three different plazas that each have their own church, and they correspond with an original indigenous Indian settlement.
Yeah.
So it's very cool to see how the colonization almost transcends time in that regard. And yeah, the main street acts like a dike to prevent against flooding, but you see how the original city was built out, along with the barricaded walls that were built around the city as well to protect it.
Yeah. Mm.
It's very
You
cool
know,
because a lot of the original houses that were there, the ground floors have small shops in them, while the top of the building was housing that could have anywhere between 3 to 10 units.
yeah. Yeah. It's one of the interesting things was, like, keep in mind this was built in 1540. It didn't have regulations stipulating that there were certain things you could and couldn't do in the area, like specific to it being historic,
Mm.
until 1959. And those weren't really enforceable until 1970. So this place went 430 years with, well, technically you could tear it down and start again, but no one wanted to do that, and no one did that. And that's a very fun part of the journey of how this thing survived. Because
Part
we
of that
talk a lot of yeah, we talk a lot about how much effort goes into protecting these things and
part of
ensuring
that
they
though
don't decay.
stems a lot from how these houses interact with the community and the environment. I mean, they're connected to the shops beneath them. They open up to these large courtyards. You had hallways connecting. These buildings shared common roofs. They're very much this idea that ironically circled back in probably the 1960s and 70s, where you start seeing these buildings with these communities where each one became its own little microcluster within this neighborhood, within this city, and that's how they stem out and build. And to be honest, that tends to be some of the longest lasting impacts is these insular like clustered communities.
Yep.
And this was just an example of that. And it showed, and especially even houses for the merchants and crowns had these courtyards,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
even
and
secondary courtyards for their servants.
yeah, no, and one of the fun things with just how just naturally invested this community is into sort of maintaining the city as it, as it was and as it for the foreseeable future will continue to be. There is no there is no management plan for this. There is no management plan per se. Instead, what exists is a combination of a few national regulations and local public sentiment is extremely strongly tied to this is our town, this is how it's supposed to look. Everyone else go away.
Not to mention, a lot of the houses are passed down within the families.
Yeah.
Most of them are actually privately owned, with the exception of the Catholic Church owning some of the buildings, specifically the local diocese.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting, but it's unique almost specifically to this city.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's unique to this city, and this city get you know gets to be on the World Heritage Site not only for being this unique cultural phenomenon that has survived all these years, but also for being kind of a living baseline for what were all these cities that were being built 500 and 400 years ago when the Spanish were running amok throughout South and Central America.
And while there's not a direct management in place for this site, there is a fairly strict building code law of 1994, which specifically mandates that all sites that have a cultural interest plus a supervisory and technical support from the national government. So
Yeah.
there's specific interventions there, and then there is control over interventions by private owners as well within the historic area. So there is some level of protection in place, but it's very much a pride and familial tradition to keep and maintain these buildings.
Yeah, there is no what we see with a lot of things. There is no formal agreement of this is the municipality, these are the private stakeholders, this is the national government, and they all sit down at a table every 2 years and argue about things. It's more of a quiet understanding that these are the laws that the federal government or the national government has to, you know, you know, for everyone to abide by for this stuff, and you, the people, are just not interested in messing with it.
But yeah, figured we'd cover this site. It's a very interesting one. We've seen a couple of different Spanish colonial sites, but not many in South America like this, and this really was a starting and jumping off point for the Spanish to invade South America.
Yep.
But let us know your thoughts down below, and yeah, we'll see you guys in the next episode. Bye.